Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the CM Mentors podcast. My name is Matt Graves, and my co-host is Kyle Grandell. What's up, Kyle?
Hey, Matt, doing great. Happy to be here for season 3.
I know this is like welcome back, I guess, because it's when we started this, I didn't know we was gonna do 3 episodes, much less 3 seasons. So
it's pretty exciting, man. I was trying to think back to conversations we had with Felipe, and he was telling us about his podcast. And what was he saying? It was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 seasons or something before it just, really got traction and kind of was taken off. And, we're starting to see some good growth too from the numbers, from what I understand.
Dude, I used to really watch them and nerd out over it. Like, oh, somebody listened to the podcast. Like every time there was a download. But it's cool though. No, it's like people comment on, starting to get put into like those different, what do you call them? Where they group all the different podcasts together, right? There was a guy on LinkedIn who put out, I'm completely not even thinking what it's called now, but like, he put together like 5 or 10, like these are the top podcasts in the construction space. And we somehow managed our way up there. So
no, we squeaked on by that one, just like I got through college, man. Boom.
I assumed you bought a place on the thing, because all those places are usually bought for. So I assumed you greased the wheels, but
it's a lot of money. No, I'm kidding. Sweet. Well, very excited about this. I'm glad we're here, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. With us for this episode is Josue Perea. Joining us from Haslett, Texas. He's a BIM specialist, does some electrical BIM design. He launched his own company called Covenant Solutions. Very excited to talk about that and hear more about it. And he's also an ex-boxer and Formula One fan. So looking forward to this chat. It's going to be fun.
How you guys doing?
Hey, welcome.
How are you, man?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I was better until I'm now surrounded by 2 electricians, so I've had better days.
No, it's
come on now.
This is a great day in the history of the show.
So you want to give us Kyle did a pretty good background intro of you, but do you want to give us anything he may fill in the blanks of what he missed?
I mean, it was pretty solid. I'm a pretty normal guy, just going to work and going back home, It's I'm married. I have 3 kids. Well, 2 kids, 1 on the way.
Nice.
You said ex-boxer. I still teach. I have my kid in a jiu-jitsu gym, and I am pretty active there with him as well. So, just living the life, man.
At what age did you start jiu-jitsu with him?
Well, I actually lied about his age a little bit, since he's a little bit taller. They told me to wait till he was 5, that he can go in with the 5-year-olds. He had just turned 4, and I was like, yeah, he's 5. So I got him in there, and I was expecting that first class for him to come back to me crying a couple times, and me to be like, oh, you're all right, just get back in there. But no, the kid loved it. He took off, and I mean, it's been going ever since.
Nice. I got 7-year-old twin boys, and one of them he needs something like that. He needs to get tackled and knocked down a couple times. So it
builds character. It definitely builds character.
Oh man! So Josue, tell us a little bit about your career trajectory. Like what kind of got you into BIM in the first place? And I mean, obviously you started your own gig. So where do you see things going?
I have a very unorthodox or peculiar story of how I got into it. It's not the normal route that I see everywhere that I go. I definitely worked out through the field, and I got a opportunity. My brother was climbing the ladder as well. I have a brother that's 4 years older than me. He also has his electrical company. He does pretty well for himself. But even now that I'm in BIM, I still, every once in a while, he'll call me and be like, hey, we're doing a shutdown. We got to get this wire pulled. So I'm back on my tools every once in a while, and continue to do that. Before any of this BIM stuff, I'm an electrician. So I continue to have that outlook on this industry. But yeah, whenever my brother was climbing the ladders, he kind of pulled me into the role. And during COVID, I helped out. And funny enough, man, it's a peculiar story of what got me back into BIM. It was an old PM that I worked with while I was still an apprentice electrician. And I was kind of leading a little crew. And there was two guys named Andre and Savo, very heavy Russian accents that nobody could really understand them. So they ended up sending them to my crew. And I ended up learning Russian on the job. I would just ask them, hey, how do you say this? And how do you say that? And I would write down the pronunciation. And I ended up learning it. So at some point I was kind of fluent with them. And they sent us to another area. And there was a guy that didn't speak a lick of English, just Spanish. And I see him and Andre just kind of, pointing and doing all these hand gestures. So I walked up to the guys and I asked Andre, I'm like, "Ti bien noś napomash? Do you need help?" He looks at the other guy. He's like, "Ti bien noś napomash?" And I'm like, que si necesitas ayuda. And sure enough, he said, "Sí, estoy corriendo pipa." I looked at Andre. I'm like, "Prokladivayo trubi," just pointed at the pipe, and they both took off. And unbeknownst to me, one of the PMs was right behind me. He's like, "Did you just translate Russian into Spanish?" And I looked at him and I'm like, I guess I did. And I walked away, and I guess I made an impression then. And that came up later whenever he pulled me back and recruited me back into the BIM department.
Oh, okay.
I never would have guessed, becoming a Russian to Spanish translator was probably ever in your career trajectory.
Right. It's been a weird ride, man, but I definitely bring a little bit of that field mentality into the BIM world, and it's helped me out quite a bit.
Oh, well, that's the managers that I've seen that have had those. Sorry, Kyle, I'm talking here. No, those are the best BIM managers that I've seen are the ones that actually come from the field, right? They've actually dealt with the issues, and they've actually had to install it, and they've had to problem solve, and they've had to do all those sort of stuff. Like, those are the ones that really excel because they're not just purely working in a virtual space that's in a perfect laboratory, right? And so, that's the best that I've seen are the ones that actually done the thing on the tools,
Absolutely.
Well, no, and I was going to say the same thing, Matt. And I was just going to say that, from what I've seen on the engineering side too, the design side, the best ones are the ones that can not just visualize the route, but they understand all the connection points and, the difficulty of even accessing that area that you have to install that conduit or, that box or that enclosure. Do you have enough working space to even work inside that panel? Those things that can often be overlooked if you're just sticking a box in a model. If you haven't installed it, you don't understand how it gets mounted. It can be a really big problem. So,
let's take a step back for people. Oh, sorry, man. I was just gonna say, take a step back for people who that may have heard the word BIM and have a loose understanding of what it entails. And it's really, the more I learn about it, the more I don't know about it. Right. So, like, high level, like, what is BIM?
So it's essentially just pre-construction planning. I mean, that's all it is. We take the drawings that they give us, contract drawings, we kind of go through that, and we start planning out our routes and coordinating it in a 3D model, and go from there. Throughout the course of a project, you just coordinate with the other trades. Hey, you're in my way here, you're in my way there, and just try to build the project in a 3D model before you actually get out there in the field. And essentially, it does eliminate some obstacles that you would bump into out there in the field.
So are you working with the designers, with the engineering, the electrical engineers, and working up on the front end, or are you more in the coordination after, the MEP contractors are under contract, the general contractors are in contract, working through that coordination phase?
So I've done both. Tesla was the only place that I worked with the engineers where essentially my engineer basically laid out all the panels and said, I want a panel here, I want a panel there. And I had to be the one designing the conduit runs, the cable tray runs that we're going to get power from the substation out there. But I have worked closely. And then as of now, I've just been in the coordination MEP aspect of it.
Nice.
Are you finding that, electrical compared to other trades, do you see any trends as far as do you always see us pushing the other trades, kind of driving the design front of things, or are we always, the afterthought, and then people just have design stuff to say, just go figure it out. You're electrical. What are you thinking?
Before he answers, I'm going to say, if you're not modeling 1-inch conduit and less, you're not leading the charge.
Well, the problem is whenever you have several of those 1 inch next to each other, and you have to have a nice space to run your conduit rack. And so that can get a little dicey there. To answer your question, Kyle, it's a bit hard because you do need to block out a good amount of space, and make sure that your guys out there in the field have enough real estate to work in. And sometimes, since it's easier for us to move conduit, they usually make us move everything, and any obstacle, it usually comes back to us to try to figure it out around them. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope there. It can be a little bit of a pain, but I do notice that trend. They usually make us move.
Well, as of right now, I'm starting a movement in the industry. Electricians first.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. I'll be the first to sign up with you.
It ain't gonna work. It's not gonna work.
It's worth the effort, though.
The thing is, though, I mean, electricity can flow uphill, and it can bend 360 degrees before you have to have a box. So you got a lot of flexibility in what you can do versus other people can't.
I mean, that puts it into perspective. It still doesn't make it any more pleasant for us to continue moving during the coordination of things.
Do you ever have times when, I mean, I'm sure you do, especially being in the field, because it's really easy to bend conduit in a model and just draw it here to here to here to here to here, just work around it. But then the guy's actually out in the field and they've got to do all that. And they're like, what the hell are you doing, man?
I haven't bumped into it too much. I have had to deal with models that got designed like that, and I've had to come in and kind of rethink things. Another issue that I've bumped into as well has been whenever they run on top of everything, like on top of duct, on top of plumbing and everything, and all of a sudden we have to rethink through a conduit run or something, and all of a sudden you're blocked off because, hey, I need to set a box here, in order to go another route, and it's no longer accessible. So you kind of, pigeonholed yourself in a way. And it's been a challenge that I've faced multiple times.
Definitely. Well, and there's no shortage of mistakes that you find too. I mean, maybe, I don't know, different projects have different requirements and expectations, but, depending on how detailed you get in your BIM design and where the routing is supposed to exactly be, there's always plenty of mistakes too. Maybe their conduit gets run in a different spot and doesn't get caught until later on. So you gotta make the decision. Do they have to rerun it, or is it okay? You get some of those mistakes.
Yeah. So I guess me being a field guy, I'm very comfortable going out there to the field and walking it with the superintendent, and getting his intake on things, and being able to speak the same language. One of the biggest challenges that I have faced in this industry has been a huge gap to bridge between the field teams and the design teams. There's a lot of past work experiences that I've had where the design team has been like, oh, those guys are idiots, they don't even know how to read a print. And I mean, just because it looks pretty to us and we understand everything that's going on that piece of paper, it feeds our ego because but then you don't realize that it's the actual teams out there actually building this stuff, so you have to cater to them, and it becomes more of a back and forth because the field teams are like, oh, those guys are idiots, they don't even know how to hold a hammer, so it becomes I don't know what word I'm looking for, but more of a competition between the two branches, and there's a big gap to bridge there for sure.
I've seen the BIM coordination phase does a really great job of doing that, because you're taking the engineer's design, which isn't always constructible, because a lot of times they're working in 2Ds, right? Like if you overlay the MEPs, whenever you first, everyone, all, ME and P all go do their BIM model, and you overlay them, and then you have like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 clashes, right? Like just because everything's just right inside of each other. And then you have to go through the coordination process. So the design isn't always coordinated, for one. Two, it's not always really constructible, for two. And then you're taking the expertise of the contractor and doing that pre-thinking through it, right? And especially if you're going to prefab anything or, do like that. But you're really taking the construction knowledge and applying it to the design, which now you're one step ahead whenever you actually start to, hang conduit or pipe or ductwork or prefabricating the stuff as well. You're kind of morphing that design into something that's actual going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. The company has to be ready for it, though. That is a big topic. Yes. that some people just don't understand. It's a two-edged sword whenever you talk about SOPs and standard operating procedures that companies already have in place, but it requires a buy-in from everybody. It requires everybody to be on the same page. Some companies already have been developing their SOP for a while, and they have it down, and anybody that they bring in that's new to the company, they're easily able to plug them into the already rolling system that they have. But companies that don't have that in place they're going to struggle, and that's where you're going to have that bridge to gap. Essentially, you have to be able to work in this industry that I'm in. You have to be able to adapt, whether you're going to stick to an SOP or if you're going to cater to the superintendent. Because I've had a couple of projects where the superintendent has gotten in there and on Bluebeam they've laid everything out, and they have their own little drawings, and they have an Excel spreadsheet where they numbered each little conduit run, each line that they did, and the information of the run. So essentially that's clear in their head. That's their mental clarity. So whenever I go in there and I do drawings, I cater to that and use those same numbers that he already did, essentially working with him, because I can stick to an SOP myself and be like, well, I want to do this and this and this, and put all this information that they don't necessarily need on these shop drawings. Like I've seen a couple of shop drawings that have these conduit runs, and they'll have like, oh, this conduit is bent at 22 degrees and stuff, but they don't understand that usually out in the field we're doing 30 degrees all the time because it's so easy to measure. You just double the amount and run with it, And so all this information that is just not useful in a shop drawing. And if you can simplify that and cater to the superintendent and the things that he's already come up with, because the truth is that the superintendent is probably just going to hand these sheets off to the foreman, and the foreman is going to be handing some of these sheets off to some of the newer guys, the less experienced guys, and they're having to run with it. So if you can simplify these drawings for the superintendent and for the field teams, that's one way to go. But if you already have a good system rolling in the company where these standard operating procedures are already in place and everybody's following them and everything is moving well, like a lubricated machine, then go ahead and follow the standard operating procedures. But you have to know where the company is at in order to be able to cater to that.
Well, and there's a lot of good wisdom in there, Josue. Thanks for bringing that up. And I'm just thinking back to my days. Basically the foreman says, hey, I need a conduit from this part to this part by the end of the day. And that's the direction they're given, unless there is a little bit more detail. There can be a lot of details that put in a design and drawings that just gets lost, and it's just not needed. That effort, that time could have been spent elsewhere to actually move the project forward, move the design forward in a way that's actually useful. So, when it comes down to certain things, getting into some of those details, it gets field routed to an extent anyways. I mean, you follow the BIM model, but there's also some field routing that has to happen. That's just how it is. You can't route every single conduit around every single thing. And for a lot of reasons. But at the end of the day, engineering design side, put the effort in where you get the return. Don't spend your time wasting your time on stuff that could be handled doing other things.
Absolutely. What are you thinking, Matt? I see the gears turning.
I had a thought and then I lost it. I literally did.
Yeah, it's
No, the thought I was thinking was, you were talking about, what it makes for a company to be kind of ready to take on the BIM and stuff. And I was just thinking through, I was like, I wonder how many companies nowadays that are doing, sizable commercial jobs. Because, there's commercial is such a broad term that, there's a certain level of project where BIM makes sense. But I was wondering how many companies nowadays have really jumped into the BIM BIM side of things and are really implementing it and really doing stuff kind of that right way? Would you have any guess? Is there a lot out there that are still
there's
old school?
There's very, very much so a lot of companies that are still doing it old school. And it, from what I know, it is expensive to start implementing BIM. I know that it does run companies, a pretty penny to start doing it. I do see a benefit in it, right? Pre-planning and getting these things out of the way ahead of the project. And if you can get a certain level, because there's always going to be variables that require field coordination and that aren't necessarily going to go according to the drawing, right? But if you can get, 50, 60, 70% of the project kind of figured out and rolling, then I do think that it would impact, maybe even the profit margins, but for sure the efficiency of the project.
Oh, it's definitely an investment. Just building up the team to do it, right? Because you can't just take anybody off their tools and throw them on a computer, and you can't just take anybody who knows how to use Revit and have them be an electrical BIM coordinator, right? So building up that team, building out the infrastructure to support that team and how that team flows into your field operations, if you're going to prefabricate anything. And so it is a huge upfront investment. I feel like the ones that have really dug into it is, they've almost been forced by the general contractors they work for, right? It's written into their contract, like, you must BIM coordinate. And they're like, all right, well, I guess we'll go down this path. And they're almost forced to, and then they get into it and they're like, oh yeah, I see that this is actually useful. It's actually helping me. But they almost need that somebody forcing their hand to start. Yeah,
and not a lot of people are adopting it, but the ones that do adopt it and can pull it off, because like you said, it does require a initial investment, and sometimes you don't see a payoff immediately. You're going to struggle to get the gears rolling, and you're going to struggle to get some traction. So building that team and getting them to flow properly and getting them to communicate properly with the field teams, it is going to take a little bit to get some traction going. So I can only speak on my experience. If you can, promote from within, and, a guy that's sharp out there that has been showing some kind of potential, that, has been on his A game, if you can promote from within and, kind of build up his knowledge into BIM, that has been, a game changer in a lot of the companies that I know that have taken that approach, where guys truly know the field aspect of it, and then they can bring that knowledge into the design aspect of it.
No, for sure. Well, and it kind of leads me to two really quick thoughts. And the first one is just, and actually we did a LinkedIn post about this within the last couple of weeks, is, would you rather spend 5 to 10% upfront planning and pre-construction, or spend 20+% in your change orders down the road? To me, the math is pretty easy there. The numbers just make sense. And I'm gonna go ahead and say 90% or more of the time that's going to be accurate. So that aside, just making a little point there that I agree with everything you're saying. It also comes down to really the BIM is almost kind of like lean in a lot of ways. Is the way I see it. It's that the adoption of it is so key and so critical, and also too, getting the buy-in to get it adopted is the first real challenge. But then even once you do, you got to keep the buy-in, and you have to keep it used in the right ways for it to be properly used in the projects too. For example, a BIM model that's updated at the beginning of the project and then only every few months afterwards, useless. It has to be almost like a daily thing, or at least weekly, a few times a week, as progress gets made. But if there's not a design coordinator, not somebody driving those changes and those updates to that BIM model, it's probably just being used as a documentation tool, and that's a very expensive one at that point.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to change subject.
Yeah, to add to the change orders and what you said, a lot of the time we can catch that up front. I worked on a couple of projects where I was working for Titan at the time, and they throw us into a remodel at a school, was a medical school, UNT, and it was in downtown Fort Worth. But I get in there and I actually go out to the field and I check out the electrical rooms and I see that we don't have the clearance. There's no way for me to put this up to code. And the GCs always try to get some by you and be like, well, can you at least draw it in for coordination purposes? And I was like, no, sir, I'm not willing to draw anything that, we can't even put up to code, because the minute I draw that in and we coordinate around it, you're going to hold us to it. So essentially, I had to fight that battle on my own. And there's a lot of people involved, and they just kept throwing a lot of stuff at me. I just kept throwing the code book right back at them. And we were able to get a change order right then and there. They had to relocate the electrical room and kind of build out a whole new room. And there was nothing that I was willing to stop at, because I just wasn't able to put it up to code. So that could even save you up front in the change orders aspect. If you have somebody seasoned enough to be able to catch on to these things and catch on to them ahead of time, it saves you a lot of the headache on the back end, and then kind of gets you something up front as well.
100%.
So you're talking about, I remember what the thought was I had. You were talking about, kind of the level of detail you put into your drawings and whatnot. And I was just thinking, like, you can put every bit of detail in your drawing possible, right? But at some point, there's diminishing returns. And at some point, it's probably even regressive, because the guy in the field installing it, it's confusing to him, right? He doesn't need to know all that stuff. And so you need to give him what he needs to know, nothing more, nothing less, sort of. So with that said, there's different levels of BIM detail, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 plus, or like, I guess I was looking on my other screen here because I was literally chatting with ChatGPT about this the other day and really trying to understand more about the levels. But anyway, so I guess we're on level 2 today. That's kind of the level that the industry's in.
Yeah. So different projects require, different level of detail. Some government projects, at the airport or something, they're gonna say at the BIM coordination meeting, the opening one, and it's a LOD 500, and that means that you're practically gonna have to draw every little thing in there. Now, in terms of coordination, you can definitely throw all that detail in there and coordinate it in the 3D model. But definitely, at least from my experience, that's what I do whenever I produce that model into shop drawings. I definitely cut back on the information that I am going to give, so try to appease both sides there to give the general contractor the level of detail that they want, but still not overload our guys out in the field with information, so they don't sit there second guessing things. And next thing you know, I'm getting calls and I have to be attending these things. So yeah, if you can limit the information, you can definitely play both sides. You don't have to stick to just, this LOD and then that same LOD you're going to transfer out to the field. You have to be able to understand and know that, even if you do a certain LOD in the model, you don't have to transfer that onto the sheets and overload information onto them.
What's the right, in your opinion, what's the right level of detail to draw to? I mean, at some point, like, every modeling and every washer and every nut becomes screw. Is like, do you really need this? But yes. Sometimes it's required. And you're like,
I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary, if I'm honest. Even anything under an inch. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of the time we reroute 3/4, 1 inch conduit, and it's super easy. I mean, Kyle, I'm sure you know about it. It's super easy to reroute these things. So I think that, yes, if you're going to draw a whole conduit rack that has several 3/4 inch conduits, sure, draw it out, get the routing in there.
Yeah.
When you produce the shop drawings, we're going to go at 9 foot off the ground, and we're going to run here, this many feet off the wall, and blah, blah, blah. Give them that. But aside from that, once you start branching out each conduit, I don't think that, individual 3/4, 1 inch conduits should be modeled to a certain degree, depending on how the relationship goes with the general contractor as well. You kind of pigeonhole your field guys too, because they, to a certain degree, have to stick to those BIM models and those designs and everything. So if you draw every little thing out, you're not giving the guys out in the field too much leeway for them to improvise and do, certain things that out in the field wouldn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to go through here. Something is right there, so I can cut back and maybe take this other little change and route. And they do that all the time. But if you're sitting there drawing each individual run, you're kind of limiting them on how they do it.
You kind of take the craftsmanship out of it to some degree too, because a lot of times what I've seen is you have the BIM model done at the beginning, really before you start anything, and you kind of hit print, and you go start installing stuff, right? And then, but along the way, there's gonna be some sort of conflict, some sort of RFI, something didn't work, a product became back ordered and it's just products, and so it's like to some level you're gonna need to be able to improvise in the field and change stuff and make on the fly decisions and moves. And if you're handcuffed to the model and if you have to go back and I don't know, do you go back and coordinate every RFI and every change and update it basically the entire project?
No, sir. Usually we wait for the project to kind of close out, and the superintendent is doing these red lines, marking up the sheet, and hey, we took a different route for this one. And at the end of the project, we usually get those red lines back, and then I update the model as to most accurately reflect what is out there in the field.
Right.
Well, and Matt, I'm glad you brought up the point about craftsmanship, because the direction that it also goes for me in my mind is ownership, which I think is part of that craftsmanship, by the way. But telling an electrician that, hey, you have to do it every single step of this installation the way I'm telling you to, versus saying, hey, you're the expert, I trust you, go make it happen. Ownership's a lot different in those two scenarios, and being able to really critically think about it. And a lot of the times they can probably find a better way to do it, whether it's more efficient or the route's better, or maybe there's some circuits that can be combined in a way in different conduit that you didn't think about, or maybe different pull boxes, different locations. They can get really creative with the conditions in the field, and generally, I'm going to say most of the time, probably improve it in some way. And so, just again, to the point of how much detail, there's a point where it's also, you're taken away, I think, from their abilities and, what you're paying that craftsman to do. You're hiring them as an expert to install that stuff.
Absolutely. And I mean, not only that, but I mean, I want the guys that are just starting in the field to get yelled at the same way that I did by my journeyman whenever I was coming out. But if everything's facilitated, you take a lot of challenges out of it. I'm completely kidding, but you do take some craftsmanship out of it for sure. The guys out in the field, they see it. They're there every day. They're doing it. So the essence of BIM, essentially, you have a big divide that's starting to show its head more and more, where the BIM department is trying to be its own thing, and they're kind of letting ego get in the way. But at the end of the day, it's one big team, and off of my design, we can essentially pull some material orders. You can get how many feet you want out of the runs, and sure, we can always update that as we're going through the project. But it kind of gives you a baseline to work with, and some kind of mental clarity that, hey, we can at least order this if we need a little bit more on the back end. We can order more, or I think it's going to take this many hours, because we're figuring that out in the front end. And but to go back to that, you don't want to take away the ability for these guys to react to something in the field by trying to take care of absolutely everything on the front end. Like, it's just not realistic. It really isn't. You're going to have factors that play into this, and you're going to have details that are going to need to be updated. So for as much of obsession as some of these BIM departments are grabbing and being like, well, we need to iron out every tiny little detail, it's not realistic. The construction field is too unpredictable sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in my opinion, it's just like whether you're running a company, or it's even applicable to children. I think too, raising children is, if you micromanage too much, then they lose their creative abilities. And the best electricians, the best tradesmen in general, can get very creative, and they can find different ways to problem solve and come up with solutions that meets what the customer needs. So there's certainly a fine line between how much do they need, and then how much more is actually, like Matt, I think he said diminishing returns earlier. I fully agree with that at some point.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, once again, before any of this BIM stuff, I'm an electrician at heart, so my outlook is a little bit different than anybody else. And I mean, these are just my opinions. Somebody out there that does BIM and did it the opposite way that I did and went through school and sees the value in different things that I do. I just bring a different perspective because I didn't go through those, and I bring more of a field perspective into things, and it can rattle some cages sometimes. I've been through it.
I was gonna say, I mean, because we said earlier, like, you coming from the field, you bring that field expertise, right? If you know how to get the stuff done, you know how the project's actually built because you built the project, so you can apply that kind of in the virtual world. So for anybody in the audience who's listening to this that maybe is out on their tools right now, I mean, it could be electrical, mechanical, plumbing, you name it. It could be anything, right? But if they're wanting to do something different, maybe get into the BIM world, like, how, you have any advice on how to go down that path?
Yeah, I mean, you can always go the conventional way and go to school and try to get into some kind of drafting or something and pad your resume. Quite honestly, I have found a lot of value, and it has helped me a lot in my career to have gone through the field. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. To the newer generation, back in 2015, whenever I graduated from high school, I think we were about 800,000 electricians short nationwide. And from a simple supply and demand point of view, you know that there's a good opportunity to make good money. And I got out there, and ultimately my career just has gone the way it's gone. But the puzzle pieces fall in place. Like, just don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to go out there and do the work and just climb through there. And I mean, express interest. If ultimately you want to be at a desk and doing these 3D designs rather than working out in the field, keep bringing that up. Keep talking to your project managers, and keep talking to the superintendents, and put yourself out there for sure. But you will find that going through the field and pursuing the knowledge more so than the position, you will find that it opens a lot more doors than just jumping in there and knowing how to manage AutoCAD or Revit.
When I used to work for a mechanical and plumbing subcontractor, and they were on the kind of the forefront of BIM, as kind of a decade ago, right? And their BIM department was basically half people that were, I don't know, say 40 years old ish, that came, got tired of working out in the field on their tools, but they had all that knowledge. So they set them next to like a 23-year-old kid who understood the technology that didn't understand the field, and then basically like alternated, like old guy, young guy, old guy, like that. And then it was a pretty cool dynamic because they were both sort of mentoring each other. It was a pretty diverse team, so that was a cool arrangement, I thought.
Yeah, I've seen that, and honestly, some of the best BIM teams that I've worked with have been ran by journeymans and people that, like Kyle was saying earlier, people that have been out there in the field and essentially have earned their stripes to be there leading the design of these things. It's like I said, if you can promote from within and bring one of these guys in, and maybe hire a consultant to come in and train with them every once in a while, and bring another guy in, hire somebody on, that one of these kids that actually knows and went to school for the software and all these things, and have them work side by side. You could essentially be building something that's going to benefit you and your company in the long run very well.
Yeah, very much so. Well, that's excellent stuff there. Well, guys, I think kind of running up on time here. Josue, any last words of wisdom or anything you want to share with the audience regarding to BIM modeling, or even just uses in the field, or just words of wisdom next generation?
Ooh, you kind of put me on the spot, man. I don't. I need wisdom in order to give words of wisdom. I'm still working on that.
We all are too. That's why we're asking you.
Yeah.
See, that puts even more pressure. Now you're making me nervous. No, I mean, we're at a point in time where, sure, go to school, get your stuff done, but if you can get involved with the trades, get involved with the trades. It's definitely put food on my table, and it's been a good career path that I chose. I don't regret it one bit. I'm on the younger side. You never stop learning. You never, the sky's the ceiling, like the sky's the limit whenever it comes down to this. Like you're just constantly evolving in this trade and in any trade really, and you're just constantly learning and pursue that knowledge. If you want to take a career that can give you a good, stable life, then I would encourage anybody to take this on. At the end of the day, we are going to need it as the future generations come up. Less and less people are willing to take up these trades. So I would encourage anybody to take that leap of faith and try it out.
And go Sparkies.
Go Sparkies.
Whatever.
Anything else, Matt, on your end?
No, I mean, I was just thinking the same thing too. Kind of, he was saying, like, especially, kids that are coming out of college, for instance, right? They think, they're doing a construction science degree, and they're kind of groomed to go work for a general contractor, probably one of the, in our 500, 10, the big boys, right? That's kind of what they think. But the skill set and all that, it's, you can go work for a subcontractor, any trade, right? They need project managers, project engineers, project everything, right? BIM coordinators, they need, everything that a general contractor needs, that subcontractors need it as well, maybe even more so because they're managing labor. They have a lot more labor they got to manage and a lot more risks that they're holding on to. So it's a huge opportunity in that world too. And I don't think people don't see it nearly maybe as sexy as, a big general contractor and stuff. So.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of like, maybe small business versus big business mentality in some ways too, right? And small businesses, generally, you're going to have a little more freedom, a little more flexibility. You can maybe even step outside of your role a little bit, put some different hats on and contribute. Whereas you'll be a little bit more narrow vision, more pushed in a certain direction as with a bigger company. I've seen it myself. Worked for 40,000 person, plus companies, and you have your role, and that's what you do, and you don't step outside of that role. So depends on what you want. Some people are more comfortable either way, I guess. But.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. You in smaller companies, you get more of an opportunity to do different tasks and different roles, and you end up learning more. And there's a certain value attached to that because you end up learning how to move across the chessboard in several different directions rather than just one little step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I've seen guys that go work for a big general contractor on a big, multi, 5-7 year project, and they've been in their career for 4 years and have processed submittals for 4 years. They didn't really learn anything. They didn't get out of the office trailer, and they just did that, right? I'm like, man, that is, you got 4 years of experience, but you didn't really learn much. And so the smaller companies too, where you get thrown into everything. And you're able to innovate, you're able to try, you're able to experiment. If you want to go do BIM, they say, all right, come on, go get on the computer, let's go. And so I agree with that. I think small companies rock.
Yeah, give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Well, thanks again, Josue. So if people want to get in touch with you, learn a little bit more about BIM or your background, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, reach out, Covenant Solutions. You can always email me at jperea@covenantsoul.com. Feel free to reach out. This goes to anybody. I'd be happy to help with any of the needs.
And I'm sure we'll have all your contact info in the show notes and stuff. Alex is nodding in the background. So, yep. So all your stuff will be there.
Sounds good.
So,
excellent. Thanks
cool,
so much
man.
for joining
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, guys. And Kyle, Matt, it was a pleasure speaking with you guys today.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot. Bye.